Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to episode number 300 and something. Hold on. 327 of the Zombie Train. I am the Admiral, otherwise known as Trainman or something. And this week I was supposed to be taking a question from John Blum, but I think I actually misinterpreted his question, or I can't find it. I can't find that specific question. This was back on episode 264. So in lieu of that, I'm going to actually cover a different question that I forgot to write down by the looks of it, and it's a question by Dean. He asks, did you ever reload spent ammunition casings, or did you wind up finding more ammunition? If so, how did you reload? So, I've talked about the ammunition troubles in the past. Just sort of, you accumulate enough of one caliber, and you use that up while you're building up your supplies of the other ones. And that's why we had a lot of relatively varied guns on the train that would take pretty much any kind of ammunition we could get our hands on. See, the thing about, we did end up having a deal with the military, so they were able to get us into lots of supplies and things like that. But that was Zombie Train Incorporated and beyond. Before that, though, we were a 30-man outfit. It was not that hard. We didn't use that much ammo on a regular basis. We did have instances where we used a lot, where we tried to take out pretty big hordes or something like that. But those were pretty few and far between, and generally at that point we were operating out of an established base where we knew that it was coming. Zombies, despite being very persistent, don't travel super fast. So we were able to usually get away from them and then go back and let the horde come to us. And set up a defensive line and get enough ammunition and that sort of thing. I'm not sure there was an instance where we reloaded spent casings en masse. Like, where we sat down and did a lot of that. There were some people on the train who were better scavengers than I and would use the foundry, and by extension to Uncle Paul, to help remake ammunition for stuff that we were really short on and that they really liked. But generally, people started to get proficient, or at least decent enough proficient, with a smattering of guns. So they didn't have to necessarily fall back on one thing that would only accept one caliber of bullet, and if we didn't have that, they were out of luck. And even then, in the couple of cases where that was prominently, that did prominently happen with a couple of people, it was generally only a couple of people, or, one person that favored this particular weapon, this particular caliber, and, they were the consistent drain on that caliber of bullet. Anyway, the thing that's important to recognize here, and the reason that we weren't scrounging for ammo as much as you might think we were, is that, first of all, there's ammo all over this country. There was, there still is. But ammo all over the country that was owned by nobody. Between gun stores, old military bases, or, formerly abandoned, or, military bases that had been abandoned during the course of the war, and just individual personal stockpiles, we were barely at risk ever of running out of bullets overall. Because of the fact that, 80 to 90% of everybody was dead or zombified, and I think that's maybe too low of an estimate, but, figuring that much, right? That leaves behind a lot of things, and we're talking everything. Cars, Not that we had a lot of use for them, but, cars, food, electronics, simple stuff like batteries and soap and shampoo and that sort of thing. These things that you don't necessarily think about, the things that you think about when you're packing for a long trip, and that's about it. You just sort of expect to have them otherwise. Toilet paper? Anybody? Yeah, so we could get our hands on that kind of stuff, this personal property that had been left behind. And again, that's just talking about individuals and not even stores or bases, of which there were plenty of. Plenty. And when you don't have to worry about the cops showing up, raiding the hell out of a former gun store is, well, it's not that hard. When you've got all the time in the world. So, yeah, we had moments where we were running low. And then we had other moments where we had more rounds than we knew what to do with. Going through and finding, getting all these calibers and stocking them up and going, okay, well, we have, 100,000 rounds of like 5.56 NATO or something like that. Just as an example, I'm not sure during the course of the zombie train we ever had that much NATO ammunition in general, because we didn't have a lot of military grade firearms until Zombie Train Incorporated. But you're just using a caliber, or say we've got 200,000 22 LR. Okay, are we going to get more of that, or are we going to try to get, and we're running out of space in the boxcar. Are we going to try to get more 22 because it's available and we use a lot of it, or are we going to try to get more rounds for some of the other weapons that we don't have a lot of right now? We had to make that decision all the time, and usually we would make a note of what we left behind and where. When we couldn't take everything with us, we would still try to stockpile stuff. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the stuff would still be there when we got back. I mean, think about it. There's not too many people that are going to steal it. But if somebody does come across it, you bet they're going to take it, because we would have just put together, we just put together this huge assemblage of stuff that was useful to us and would undoubtedly be useful to any other survivor. If we did leave stuff behind, we tried to leave a smattering, at least a little bit, because if somebody does stumble across it, that stuff isn't legally ours in any sense. We would try to leave stuff behind so that if somebody does stumble across it, you have, basically, they will find something useful in there. If we left behind all, rounds of one caliber, or one type, or whatever, I'm not sure what the right wording is there, Dean can probably correct me. Because I know caliber is just the barrel size, and there are many different kinds of bullets that'll fit one caliber. Anyway, I believe that's how that works. Anyway, I don't know. I was never the expert. I had to run the train. That's what I did. So, we would leave stuff behind with the idea that if somebody comes across this stuff, then we want them to be able to take something useful out of it and then survive. If we came back to an area and we saw that one of our caches had been, raided, I guess is the right word, but it's not really the right word. If people had taken stuff from one of the caches, then we knew, or at least we figured, that someone was probably nearby. And then we would send out a radio blast. Not that we wouldn't really be doing that anyway, but then we would send out, some radio noise and just see if we got a response. A lot of the time we wouldn't, because, well, people don't necessarily have radios. But it tended to be the kind of thing that people would take along with them after we gained a certain amount of notoriety, because we tried to absolutely publicize, we tried to broadly publicize the fact that we were always going to be broadcasting and listening on these frequencies, and if you need us, then then you know how to get in contact with us. You know, you can find us. It's not that hard if we are within, if you've got a good transmitter, within a couple of 100 miles, or even a couple of, well, not a couple of 1,000 miles, that's a little bit of a stretch, but we could definitely, by the end of the zombie train, when we're going to transition, we had already built up a fairly robust network of radio points. I don't know what you'd call them. Outposts? They were mostly small communities that we traded with, that we gave them a radio setup, a good radio tower, and or a good antenna and good radio, and some solar panels and batteries, or something to that effect. Something renewable usually. A good number of communities gravitated towards places with dams because, well, you have pretty much limitless power as long as the rain keeps up, and with the fairly drastic climate change, I guess, it was sort of like slamming the brakes on what climate change was happening and throwing it in reverse. But things got really messy after that. For years now. I mean, it was probably the quickest that we've ever seen a significant change in climate, aside from, certainly not something within the lifespan of humans, I would think. Short of like a supervolcano eruption or an asteroid hitting the planet, I don't think there is anything to compare it to. You had millions of people running out into the wilderness to try and survive, and thus chopping down all these trees and burning a million campfires, which played hell with the atmosphere. It actually had a cooling effect due to the you'd think a greenhouse gas would then cause greenhouse gases would then cause a warming, but because it thickened the atmosphere so much with what they were putting out, because it wasn't just CO2, there was a short global cooling that was experienced shortly into the war. That, coupled with the fact that at the same time you had a lot of people dying, and that reduced CO2 emissions and methane emissions and that sort of thing, then you just had this really weird imbalance. From what I understand, I am not a climate scientist. There's a little bit more of a breakdown of this in Max Brooks's World War Z, where he covers the events of the war, at least some of them. And yeah, I think he actually tells it from the point of view, of the interviews that he did with the astronauts that were on the ISS. Yeah, because they had an overview that nobody else did, that's for sure. So, yeah, we were never really hurting that much. We didn't have to do any reloading ourselves, and by the time you would think that we would have to do some of our own manufacturing, which we didn't really get to, sort of thankfully. Sorry, my mind just blanked. Yeah, the military was there. Once Zombie Train Incorporated came around, and they basically said, we'll supply you with whatever you need within reason, it was fair game for us to go into military caches and take whatever we needed, with their permission anyway. So we were pretty good. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video.